I was halfway through the executive meeting when I realized my signature had been forged on a budget approval I'd never seen, and in that moment, I understood that staying silent would be the last mistake I ever made here. My name is Charity Cortez, and for 11 years I had been the Senior Operations Coordinator at Meridian Consulting Group, a mid-sized firm that prided itself on ethical client relationships and transparent financial practices. I was the person who made sure invoices matched contracts, that travel expenses aligned with company policy, that every dollar spent could be traced back to a legitimate business purpose. I wasn't flashy. I didn't seek recognition. I simply believed that if you did your work with integrity, the organization would protect you in return. I was wrong. The meeting that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in March. Our CEO, Gregory Harmon, had called an emergency gathering of department heads to discuss quarterly projections. I wasn't typically included in these sessions, but my director, Jerry Voss, had asked me to attend as his support. Jerry had been with Meridian for 8 years, 2 years after I'd started, and had steadily climbed from senior consultant to director of operations. He was charismatic, confident, and had a way of making executives feel like every idea was brilliant. People trusted him. I had trusted him. I sat near the back of the conference room with my tablet and notes, ready to clarify numbers if needed. Jerry stood at the front, walking Gregory and the other directors through a presentation on cost-saving measures. Everything seemed routine until he clicked a slide titled Approved Operational Adjustments. My name appeared at the bottom, listed as the approving coordinator for a series of vendor contract modifications. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady but my mind suddenly sharp. I had never seen those modifications. I had never approved of them. I glanced around the room. No one else seemed concerned. Gregory nodded approvingly. Michael's voice was smooth, assured. If you're drawn to stories where the truth emerges slowly, without drama, only through careful observation, you might find what happens next worth your time. I said nothing. I took a screenshot of the slide with my tablet, kept my expression neutral, and made a mental note of every person in that room. When the meeting ended, I approached Jerry in the hallway. "Can I ask you something?" I kept my voice even. He turned, smiling. "Of course. What's up?" "That slide with the vendor adjustments. I don't remember reviewing those." His smile didn't falter. "Oh, you sent me the preliminary data last month. I just formatted it for the presentation." "You were CC'd on the final email." "I wasn't." "You sure?" "I'll forward it again. Probably got buried in your inbox." He patted my shoulder lightly. "Don't worry about it. Everything's compliant." I nodded. "Okay. Thanks." I walked back to my desk, opened my email, and searched every folder, every keyword, every thread from the past 3 months. There was no email. No approval request. No preliminary data. I opened the shared drive and found the vendor files. The modification documents had my name typed at the bottom, but the digital signature was a scanned image, not the embedded certificate I always used. Someone had copied my signature from another document and pasted it. I sat very still for a long time. That night, I went home and did not mention any of this to my partner, Daniel. He was a high school teacher, kind and steady, and he would have told me to report it immediately. But I had learned, over 11 years in corporate environments, that accusations without proof were career suicide. I needed to understand the scope before I acted. I began keeping a separate folder on my personal cloud drive. I titled it Archive and copied every document that had been altered or attributed to me without my knowledge. I did this quietly, methodically, during lunch breaks and after hours. I did not change my behavior. I smiled at Jerry in meetings. I responded to his emails promptly. I gave no indication that anything had shifted. But everything had shifted. The second incident happened 3 weeks later. A junior analyst named Priya Mehta came to my desk, visibly anxious. She was 24, earnest, and terrified of making mistakes. "Charity, I need to ask you something, but I don't want to get anyone in trouble." I closed my laptop. "What's going on?" "Last week, Jerry asked me to adjust some figures in the client billing report. He said it was just a rounding issue, but when I went back to check, the original numbers were accurate. The adjusted ones inflated the billable hours by almost 15%. Did you ask him about it?" "I did. He said the client had verbally agreed to the adjustment and that it was fine. But there's no documentation of that agreement. And he told me not to mention it to anyone else." I looked at her carefully. "Did you make the adjustment?" "I did. I didn't know what else to do." "He's my supervisor." "Okay," I said. "Thank you for telling me. What should I do?" "For now, nothing. Keep a record of the conversation. If he asks you to do something similar again, tell him you need written approval from the client. Don't make it sound like a challenge. Just frame it as protocol." She nodded, still uneasy. "Do you think I'm overreacting?" "No," I said. "I think you're paying attention." After she left, I pulled the billing report she'd mentioned. The inflated figures were there, formatted to look seamless. I cross-referenced them with the client's original contract. The discrepancy was clear. I saved both versions to my archive. That same week, I received a company-wide email announcing that Meridian had been acquired by a larger firm, Arcadia Solutions. The acquisition had been in quiet negotiation for months, but most of us had no idea it was happening. The email assured us that operations would continue as normal, that leadership transitions would be gradual, and that employee roles were secure. I felt a small, cold clarity settle in my chest. Acquisitions meant audits. Audits meant scrutiny. And scrutiny meant that whatever Jerry had been doing would eventually surface, whether I acted or not. But I also knew that if I waited too long, I could be implicated. My name was already on documents I hadn't approved. If an auditor found those before I flagged them, my credibility would be destroyed. I decided to wait just a little longer. The third incident was smaller, but it lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. It was my 11th work anniversary at Meridian, a milestone the company typically acknowledged with a modest celebration or at least a personalized gift. In previous years, I'd seen directors receive engraved plaques, gift cards to nice restaurants, even extra PTO. Jerry called me into his office that afternoon. He handed me a small card and a $10 gift card to a chain coffee shop. "Congratulations on 11 years, he said. "We really appreciate everything you do." I looked down at the card. It was generic, the kind you could buy in a box of 20 at an office supply store. My name was written on a ballpoint pen. "Thank you," I said. "You're the backbone of this department, Charity." I don't say that enough. I nodded, slipped the card into my bag, and left his office. I did not feel angry. I felt something worse. I felt seen clearly for the first time. Not as a colleague. Not as someone whose work mattered. But as someone whose loyalty could be assumed, whose contributions could be minimized, whose silence could be purchased for $10. I went back to my desk and opened my archive folder. I added a note to the timeline, anniversary acknowledgement. Symbolic. 2 days later, Jerry asked me to confirm approval on a compliance report that flagged several irregularities in departmental spending. The report had been generated automatically by our internal audit system, and it required a coordinator's review before being submitted to corporate oversight. He forwarded it to me with a brief message: "Can you take a look and confirm this is clear for submission? Let me know by end of day." I opened the report. The irregularities were legitimate. There were discrepancies in vendor payments, missing receipt documentation, and unexplained reimbursements totaling just over $40,000. The system had flagged them correctly. I replied, "I've reviewed the report. The flagged items require additional documentation before I can confirm clearance. I can work with you to gather the necessary records." His response came within minutes, "No need. I'll handle the documentation on my end. Just mark it clear so we can move forward." I read his message 3 times. Then I wrote back, "I'm not comfortable marking it clear without supporting documents. That's standard protocol." He called me 30 seconds later. "Charity, hey. I think there's some confusion here." His tone was friendly, patient. "The flags are just system errors. I've already spoken to finance about it. They're aware. I just need you to process it so it doesn't hold up the reporting cycle. If finance is aware, they can provide documentation. I'll attach it to the report and submit it today." There was a pause. "This feels like you're making this more complicated than it needs to be." "I'm just following the process we've always followed." Another pause. "Charity, I need you to trust me on this." "I do trust the process," I said. "That's why I'm asking for the documentation." He exhaled slowly. "All right. I'll get you what I can. But I'm disappointed. I thought we had a stronger working relationship than this." "We do," I said. "That's why I'm being thorough." He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. I had not accused him. I had not escalated. I had simply refused to participate. That refusal, I knew, had changed everything. The documentation never came. 2 days later, the report was submitted by someone else in the department, marked clear without my name attached. I saved a copy of the original flagged version. I saved Michael's emails. I saved my responses. I did not sleep well that week. By mid-April, the Arcadia acquisition was moving into its operational phase. New leadership began visiting our office, sitting in on meetings, reviewing department structures. There was a palpable tension in the air, the kind that comes when people realize their routines are about to be dismantled. I was in the break room one afternoon when I overheard 2 colleagues talking quietly near the coffee machine. "Did you hear? They're bringing in a new CFO. From Arcadia?" "Yeah. Supposed to be a forensic accountant. Someone who specializes in cleaning up messy acquisitions." I poured my coffee slowly, listening. That's not a good sign. No. It's not. I left the break room and returned to my desk. I opened my archive folder, reviewed every document I'd saved, and began organizing them into categories: altered approvals, billing discrepancies, compliance irregularities, timeline of requests. I did not know yet what I would do with this information. But I knew that when the moment came, I would be ready. That moment came sooner than I expected. The new CFO arrived on a Monday morning in early May, and I knew within 5 minutes of meeting her that everything was about to unravel. Her name was Dr. Claudia Reyes, and she did not waste time on pleasantries. She was in her mid-50s, dressed in a sharp gray suit, and carried herself with the kind of calm authority that comes from having seen every financial deception imaginable. She gathered the operations and finance teams into the main conference room and introduced herself without slides, without notes, without charm. "I'm here to ensure that Meridian's financial practices align with Arcadia's standards," she said. "That means reviewing contracts, auditing expenditures, and verifying compliance documentation. If something doesn't make sense, I will ask about it. If it still doesn't make sense, I will investigate further. My job is not to make friends. My job is to protect this organization's integrity." The room was silent. "I'll be scheduling one-on-one meetings with department coordinators over the next 2 weeks. If you have concerns, documentation, or questions, my door is open. If you have something you think I should know, now is the time to bring it forward." She looked directly at me when she said that last part. I don't know if it was intentional, but our eyes met for just a moment, and I felt a flicker of recognition pass between us. Not familiarity. Just an understanding that some people see things others choose to ignore. After the meeting, I returned to my desk and found an email waiting for me. It was from Dr. Reyes, sent during the meeting. The subject line read, Coordination Review, Schedule. The message was brief, Charity, I'd like to meet with you this Thursday at 2 p.m. to discuss operational workflows and documentation practices. Please bring any materials you feel are relevant. Thank you. I read it twice, then closed my laptop and walked to the restroom. I locked myself in a stall and breathed slowly, steadily, until my hands stopped shaking. This was it. I could bring the archive. I could lay out everything I'd documented over the past 2 months. I could tell her about the forged signatures, the altered reports, the compliance gaps. Or I could say nothing. I could show her the standard workflows, answer her questions politely, and let the audit find what it would find on its own. But I knew that silence now would make me complicit. If she discovered the irregularities later and found out I'd known, my career would be over. Worse, my integrity would be over. I decided that night to bring her everything. Thursday arrived faster than I wanted it to. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a simple navy blouse and black slacks, nothing that would draw attention. I printed copies of the key documents from my archive and placed them in a plain folder. I did not label it. I did not highlight anything. I simply organized the papers chronologically and added a 1-page summary at the front, listing the categories of concern without commentary. At 1:55 p.m., I walked to Dr. Reyes's temporary office on the 3rd floor. She had been given a small conference room with glass walls, sparse furniture, and a whiteboard covered in financial diagrams. She saw me approach and gestured for me to come in. Charity. Thank you for being on time. She closed the door and motioned to a chair. Please, sit. I sat, placing the folder on the table in front of me. She settled into the chair across from me, a tablet and a legal pad in front of her. I've been reviewing the operational documentation from your department, and I have some questions. But before I ask them, I want to give you a chance to tell me if there's anything you think I should know. I looked at her. Her expression was neutral, professional, but not unkind. There is, I said. She waited. I slid the folder across the table. I've been documenting discrepancies for the past 2 months. I didn't know who to bring them to before now. She opened the folder and began reading the summary page. Her eyes moved quickly, methodically. She did not react. After a moment, she flipped to the first document, then the second, then the third. She said nothing for a long time. Finally, she looked up. How long has this been happening? I don't know. I only started noticing it in March. And you've documented all of this on your own? Yes. Have you reported any of this internally? No. Why not? I hesitated. Because the person responsible is my direct supervisor. And because I wasn't sure it would be taken seriously without proof. She nodded slowly. That's a reasonable concern. She closed the folder. I'm going to need to make copies of this. I'll also need you to be available for follow-up questions. This may take some time. I understand. Charity, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. She leaned forward slightly. Did you participate in any of the activities documented here? Even under pressure? No. Are you certain? I'm certain. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right. Thank you for bringing this to me. I know that wasn't easy. What happens now? Now I verify everything you've given me. If it's accurate, and I believe it is, I'll escalate it to Arcadia's legal and compliance teams. There will be an internal investigation. You may be asked to provide testimony. And depending on what we find, there may be personnel changes. Will my name be protected? As much as possible. But if this goes to an external review or legal proceedings, you may be identified as a source. I can't guarantee anonymity in that scenario. I nodded. I understand. She stood and extended her hand. You did the right thing. I shook her hand, left the office, and walked back to my desk. I sat down, opened my email, and continued working as if nothing had happened. But my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. 3 days later, Jerry called me into his office. He closed the door and sat on the edge of his desk, arms folded, his expression carefully controlled. "I heard you met with Dr. Reyes," he said. "I did. She's meeting with all the coordinators." "What did you talk about?" "Operational workflows. Documentation practices." "That's it?" "That's it." He watched me for a long moment. "Charity, if there's something going on, I'd appreciate it if you came to me first. We've worked together for years. I thought we had trust." "We do," I said. "Then why do I get the feeling you're holding something back?" I met his gaze. "I'm not holding anything back." I answered Dr. Reyes's questions honestly. "That's all." He exhaled slowly. "All right. But if she asks you anything that involves me or this department, I'd like to know about it. Just so I'm not blindsided." "I'll keep that in mind." He stared at me for another moment, then waved me out. "That's all." I left his office and did not look back. Over the next 2 weeks, the atmosphere in the office became noticeably tense. Dr. Reyes conducted more meetings, requested additional documentation, and began interviewing people individually. I saw her speak with Priya, with finance coordinators, with vendor account managers. Each conversation was brief, private, and impossible to read from the outside. Jerry became quieter. He stopped joking in meetings. He started arriving late and leaving early. I noticed him checking his phone constantly, his jaw tight. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in late May, I received an email from Human Resources requesting my presence at a meeting the following morning. The subject line read, "Confidential discussion, attendance required." I felt my stomach drop. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. in a conference room I'd never used before, one tucked away on the executive floor. When I arrived, Dr. Reyes was already there, along with 2 people I didn't recognize. One was a woman in her 40s with a briefcase and a calm, assessing expression. The other was a man in his 30s holding a tablet, taking notes. "Charity, thank you for coming," Dr. Reyes said. "This is Margaret Lim, Senior Counsel for Arcadia, and Jason Park, Internal Audit Lead. Please, have a seat." I sat. Margaret leaned forward. "Charity, we've completed a preliminary review of the materials you provided to Dr. Reyes, and we've corroborated them with additional financial records. What you documented represents a pattern of fraudulent approval practices, billing inflation, and compliance violations spanning at least 18 months. I said nothing. I just listened. "We've identified approximately $230,000 in misallocated or fraudulently billed expenses," she continued. "Most of it involved vendor contracts and client billing adjustments that were never authorized by the appropriate personnel. Your signature was used on at least 14 separate occasions without your knowledge or consent." My throat felt tight. 14? Yes. I only found 6. "We found more," Jason said. Once we knew what to look for, the pattern became clear. Margaret glanced at her notes. "We need to ask you some questions for the formal record, and then we'll discuss next steps. Are you comfortable proceeding?" "Yes." They asked me to walk through the timeline again, to confirm specific documents, to describe conversations I'd had with Michael. I answered every question as clearly as I could. I did not exaggerate. I did not editorialize. I simply told them what I knew. When it was over, Margaret closed her folder. "Thank you, Charity. You've been incredibly helpful. I want you to know that you are not under investigation. You're a witness, and a credible one." "What happens now?" Dr. Reyes answered. "Jerry Voss is being placed on administrative leave effective immediately. There will be a full forensic audit of his activities. If the findings support what we've already uncovered, he will be terminated and potentially face legal action. I felt a strange, hollow relief. When will that happen? Within the week. Will I have to testify? Possibly. If this escalates to a legal claim or regulatory review, yes. But we'll keep you informed every step of the way. I nodded. Okay. Margaret stood. Charity, I know this has been difficult. But you should know that what you did likely prevented significant harm to this organization and its clients. That takes courage. I didn't feel courageous. I felt exhausted. I left the meeting and went back to my desk. I opened my email and saw a message from Michael, sent an hour earlier. The subject line was blank. The message read, "I don't know what you told them, but I hope you're proud of yourself." I deleted it without responding. That afternoon, an HR representative came to Michael's office and escorted him out of the building. He didn't make a scene. He didn't argue. He just packed his belongings into a box and walked out with his head down. I watched from my desk, feeling nothing. Priya came to see me later that day. Is it true? Is he really gone? Yes. Because of what I told you? Because of a lot of things. She looked relieved and terrified at the same time. Thank you for listening to me. You did the right thing, I said. Don't ever doubt that. She nodded and left. I stayed late that night, finishing reports that had piled up during the chaos. The office was quiet, empty. I looked around at the desks, the fluorescent lights, the bulletin board covered in outdated memos. This place has been my professional home for 11 years. I had given it my best work, my steadiest effort, my loyalty. And in return, it has taught me that loyalty without boundaries is just another word for exploitation. I shut down my computer, picked up my bag, and walked out into the parking lot. The air was cool, the sky fading into dusk. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt like I'd survived something I should never have had to endure in the first place. The forensic audit took 6 weeks to complete, and during that time, the office felt like a place holding its breath. I continued my work as usual, coordinating operations, reviewing compliance reports, managing vendor contracts. But everything felt different now. People looked at me with a mixture of respect and unease, as if I had broken an unspoken rule by refusing to stay silent. Some colleagues avoided me entirely. Others approached me quietly, asking vague questions about what had happened, questions I didn't answer. Dr. Reyes remained on site throughout the audit, her presence a constant reminder that accountability was no longer optional. She set up regular check-ins with me, not to interrogate, but to ensure I was managing the fallout. I appreciated that. She didn't treat me like a hero or a victim. She treated me like someone who had made a difficult decision and was living with the consequences. During one of our meetings in mid-June, she asked me a question I hadn't expected. "How are you doing, Charity?" Honestly. I looked up from the spreadsheet I'd been reviewing. "I'm fine." That's not what I asked. I hesitated. "I'm managing." She set down her pen. "I've done this kind of work for a long time, and I've seen what it costs people to come forward. You're still here, still working, still professional. But that doesn't mean this hasn't affected you." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "If you need time or support or just someone to talk to, you can ask for it," she said. "You don't have to carry this alone." "I know," I said quietly. "Thank you." She nodded and returned to her notes, and we continued the meeting as if the moment hadn't happened. But it stayed with me. The audit findings were released internally in late June. I wasn't given access to the full report, but Margaret Lim met with me privately to share the summary. The numbers were worse than I'd anticipated. The total amount of misallocated and fraudulent expenses had climbed to $312,000. Jerry had been systematically inflating client billings, redirecting vendor payments, and using fabricated approvals to cover his tracks. Some of the funds had been funneled into personal accounts. Some had simply disappeared into administrative gaps that no one had questioned. "We've referred the case to external authorities," Margaret said. "There will likely be criminal charges. The clients affected have been notified, and Arcadia is working on restitution agreements to maintain those relationships." "What about the people who worked under him?" I asked. "Priya and the others?" "They've been interviewed. None of them are considered complicit. They were following directives from a supervisor they trusted." "That's not a crime." "And me?" "You're clear." "Completely. In fact, Arcadia's executive leadership has specifically recognized your role in bringing this to light. They want to meet with you." I felt a flicker of anxiety. "Why?" "Because they're restructuring the operations department, and they want to discuss your future here." "I haven't thought about my future here." She smiled faintly. "Maybe you should." The meeting with Arcadia's executive team was scheduled for the following week. I was told to prepare a summary of my current responsibilities and any recommendations I had for improving operational oversight. I spent the weekend drafting notes, trying to focus on the work itself rather than the impossible weight of the past few months. When I arrived at the executive conference room, I was greeted by three people: Dr. Reyes, a man named Robert Chen who was Arcadia's chief operating officer, and a woman named Diane Foster who served as VP of Compliance. They were polite, professional, and direct. Robert spoke first. "Charity, we've reviewed your record at Meridian, and we've seen firsthand the integrity you demonstrated during a very difficult situation. We're in the process of rebuilding the operations structure here, and we'd like to offer you the position of Director of Operational Compliance." I stared at him. "Director?" "Yes. You'd be responsible for coordinating compliance across departments, managing audit workflows, and ensuring that the issues we've uncovered here never happen again. It's a significant increase in responsibility, and in compensation." Diane leaned forward. "We understand this may feel sudden. And we want to be clear, this isn't a reward for whistleblowing. This is an offer based on your skills, your judgment, and your track record. You've proven you can handle pressure, complexity, and ethical ambiguity. Those are the qualities we need in leadership." I didn't know what to say. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Robert said. "Take the time you need. But I hope you'll seriously consider it." I thanked them and left the room, my mind spinning. That night, I sat with Daniel on our back porch, a glass of wine in my hand, the sky darkening overhead. I told him about the offer. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Do you want it?" "I don't know." "What's stopping you?" I looked out at the trees, at the fading light. "I don't know if I want to stay in a place that only valued me after I proved I couldn't be silenced." He nodded. "That's fair. But I also don't know if walking away would feel like giving up. Or maybe it would feel like choosing yourself," he said gently. I didn't respond. I just sat there, letting the question settle. Over the next week, I thought about it constantly. I revisited the archive I'd built, the documents I'd saved, the moments I'd chosen to act instead of ignore. I thought about Priya, about the junior staff who would benefit from stronger oversight. I thought about the clients who had been defrauded, the systems that had failed, the silence that had allowed it all to happen. And I thought about the $10 coffee card sitting in my desk drawer, a small, meaningless token that had somehow become a symbol of everything I'd tolerated for too long. In the end, I made my decision not because I wanted recognition or revenge, but because I believed the work mattered. I accepted the position. The transition was not smooth. There were people who resented my promotion, who whispered that I had only advanced because I'd turned on a colleague. There were others who treated me with cautious deference, unsure how to navigate the new power dynamic. I ignored both groups and focused on the work. I restructured the approval processes, implemented mandatory documentation standards, and created a confidential reporting channel for junior staff to raise concerns without fear of retaliation. I trained new hires on compliance protocols. I reviewed every vendor contract personally. I made sure that no one's name would ever be forged again. It was exhausting. It was necessary. Michael's case moved slowly through the legal system. I was called to provide a deposition in August, sitting across from his attorney in a sterile conference room and answering questions for 5 hours. His lawyer tried to suggest that I had fabricated evidence, that I had a personal vendetta, that I had misunderstood routine business practices. I answered every question calmly, clearly, and factually. I did not waver. In October, Jerry pled guilty to fraud and embezzlement in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was ordered to pay restitution and serve 18 months in a minimum security facility. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to. The outcome was not about punishment. It was about accountability. By November, the office had stabilized. New leadership had settled in. Policies had been updated. The culture was different, more cautious, more transparent, less reliant on unspoken hierarchies. It wasn't perfect. But it was better. One afternoon in early December, I was cleaning out my desk and found the coffee card Jerry had given me for my 11th anniversary. I held it in my hand, staring at the faded logo, the generic design, the $10 balance that had never been used. I thought about throwing it away. But instead, I kept it. Not as a reminder of the insult, but as a reminder of the moment I stopped accepting gestures in place of respect. That evening, Dr. Reyes stopped by my office before heading out for the day. She was preparing to transition back to Arcadia's headquarters now that the restructuring was complete. "I wanted to say goodbye," she said. "And to tell you that I'm glad you stayed." "I'm glad I did too," I said. "Most days." She smiled. "The hardest decisions don't come with easy feelings. But they do come with clarity. You have that now." "I do." She extended her hand. "If you ever need a reference, or advice, or just someone who understands what it takes to do what you did, reach out." I shook her hand. "Thank you. For everything." After she left, I sat alone in my office for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the building settling into the evening. I thought about the person I'd been when I first walked into this place 11 years ago, eager, idealistic, believing that competence and loyalty were enough. I wasn't that person anymore. I had learned that loyalty without boundaries is exploitation. That silence in the face of wrongdoing is complicity. That integrity is not about being liked or rewarded, but about being able to look at yourself honestly and know you did what was right, even when it cost you. I didn't regret what I'd done. But I also didn't celebrate it. There was no triumph in watching someone's career collapse, even if they'd brought it on themselves. There was only the quiet, sobering knowledge that systems fail when good people decide that keeping the peace is more important than telling the truth. I gathered my things, turned off the lights, and walked out of the building. The parking lot was nearly empty, the December air cold and sharp. I sat in my car for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, looking up at the office windows glowing faintly in the dusk. Then I started the engine and drove home. Daniel was in the kitchen when I arrived, making dinner. He looked up and smiled. "How was your day?" "Long," I said. "But good." He poured me a glass of wine and handed it to me. "You look lighter." "I feel lighter." We ate dinner together, talking about small things with his students, weekend plans, a book he was reading. It was ordinary, comforting, and exactly what I needed. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I opened my laptop and checked my email one last time. There was a message from Priya, sent just an hour earlier. The subject line read, "Thank you." The message was short. "I don't know if I ever said this properly, but thank you for listening to me when I didn't know what to do. I'm still here because you made me feel like speaking up mattered. I won't forget that." I read it twice, then closed my laptop and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not vindication. Not relief. Just a quiet, steady certainty that I had done what I could with what I knew, and that sometimes, that's enough. I turned off the light and lay down, the weight of the past year finally beginning to lift. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I'd stay at Meridian, or if I'd eventually move on to something else. But I knew that whatever came next, I would meet it with my integrity intact. And that, in the end, was the only thing that had ever really mattered. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly through the night. If you've ever stayed quiet to keep the peace, only to realize your silence was costing you your dignity, I hope this story reminded you that speaking up isn't betrayal, it's self-respect. You don't owe your loyalty to people who never earned it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop pretending everything is fine. If this resonated with you, or if you've faced something similar, I'd genuinely love to hear your story in the comments. You're not alone in this. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. This channel is built on real stories about family, betrayal, growth, and the quiet strength it takes to choose yourself. There's always another story here, and each one carries a lesson worth remembering. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.